The UFC is hell-bent on pushing their middleweight division. Last weekend we had 4 middleweight fights and only one of them was good, and it was from the sultry tones of Chidi and Joe Kawani and his big-time knockout win. But coming up this weekend, we have that big-time middleweight fight in our main event for the title, but buried down on the prelims, we have Robert Whittaker's teammate, because that's what most people will call him. It's Jacob Mamba Malkoun, and he's going to be welcoming the UFC debutant known as AJ Dobson. And AJ Dobson is a very interesting character because he has a lot of amateur fights, a decent pro record coming in. I mean, yeah, he has less than 10 pro fights, but he really lets his record do the talking. And if you look at it, a couple submission wins, some knockout wins, he really does have it going for him. And then the other thing that he has is the fact that he spent time training at Strong Style in Independence. You know that as the Stipe Miocic gym, and at a time it was Jessica Ai's gym. And he also trains primarily out of a more immortal mixed martial arts. You know, Matt Brown's gym. So some pretty good influences. Oh, by the way, do you know who his corner was on Dana White's Contender Series, Matt?
Not off the top of my head.
It was the Hammer, Mark Coleman. So a lot of interesting influences with AJ Dobson. And if you watch him fight, this guy, like the picture that you have next to us, tends to box and tends to box very, very well. And he is a very forward pressure, heavy-handed type of guy. And again, it's worked very well for him. Now, doing the deep dive on AJ Dobson to get ready for this one, there's a lot of tape out there. I had to flex my Fight TV Plus subscription to watch some of these fights. And I got to throw it up there because, again, he gets a rear naked choke win in his last fight. He also has a rear naked choke win over Wesley Golden, who was 7-10 at the time in 2018. And if you go and watch Honor FC8, I'll throw it up on the screen. Man, that was weird. It was outdoors. So outdoor MMA, it's always a weird time. It's like, what was it? Was it Battle of Narts over with M1 Global? They used to do the fights in the mountains outside.
It was wild.
It was weird stuff. But you go back and you watch that fight that he has against Golden, drops him with the right cross. Golden crouches, and then Dobson kind of goes on his side and just grabs his neck and wraps up the rear naked. Same submission he gets against Hashem Arkaga over on Dana White's Contender Series. And in that fight, if you go back and watch that, Dobson was a slight underdog in that fight. Again, Arkaga was talking about the fact, next big Middle Eastern star in the UFC. And when you watch that fight, there's positives and negatives to draw from Dobson's performance. Positive, he gets a first-round finish. Positive, his boxing's very good, and he hits with a ton of power and knocks Arkaga down at multiple spots. Negative, he gets hit clean in that one, and he gets hit in a lot of his fights, and that's a little worrying going forward.
It definitely is, but I have great news for him. He's fighting Jacob Malkoun in his UFC debut, and that's not the hardest test out there, because you did set it up perfectly. Like, the majority of people who know Jacob Malkoun know him as, oh, that's Robert Whittaker's training partner, and I don't say this to be dismissive of him, but he does kind of fight like a guy who's told, like, give him this look. Or give Robert Whittaker that look, because he is very well-rounded himself, and we did see that in his last matchup with the wrestling side of his game, but I'm just always sort of concerned, okay, we've never really seen Jacob Malkoun put together a well-rounded game plan together. I'm sure he can. I'm just curious as to when we're going to finally see that in the UFC, and again, he's only had 2 opportunities to do so up until this point. It's just, we've had a lot of people come in, these, over 30 prospects, or, just other fighters who are in for these strange reasons that they bring up in the pre-fight promos. I don't want Jacob Malkoun to only be in the UFC because he's Robert Whittaker's training partner, but this is the fight where he's going to show us something, because I do think he's going to have a tough time on the feet, but the thing about Malkoun is that he is somewhat sound defensively. I know he got finished very fast in his UFC debut, but once he does sort of settle himself into the fight, he is a defensively sound fighter. He is good at tucking his head when he goes for his own offensive takedowns, but for me, watching Jacob Malkoun, at least up until this point throughout his UFC career, I would, it'd be really nice if he could just go out there, shoot a power double leg, get into full mount on Dobson, get a rear naked choke, and just sort of erases any of those question marks of, oh, is this guy only around because of his connection with Whittaker?
It's a really weird fight. I mean, for AJ Dobson, we kind of lean on the fact that he's got to win over a Contender Series vet, his second to last fight. He beat Kalen Hill over on B2 Fighting, and that was a neat one too, because Kalen Hill still had a little bit of that shine. He had fought Impa Kasanganay in Contender Series and went to a decision. And then Dobson drops him quick, and Hill gets back up, and he's smiling, and he's not smiling for much more because Dobson absolutely obliterates him. And for Dobson, too, even as an amateur, a win due to a cut against John Gunther, you know, the guy that sheared alpacas on The Ultimate Fighter, and then he ends up losing to John Gunther. But good experience to be able to draw from nonetheless. And for Malkoun, even going into that fight against a guy who can knock out 3 horses in a row and a small goat and Phil Haas, it was really tough to tell anybody what I was going to see out of Malkoun. So here's what I can tell you right now. He was a purple belt then. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu now. Trains out of Gracie Grange. He, in his last fight, went 8 of 24 in his takedown attempts. And Abdulrazak Alhassan, since he's kind of come back after those Sabah Hamasi fights and the long time away, Sleek Sheik. Wow, he's really turning it on with Bellator. But if you look at it for Malkoun and Alhassan's kind of been hot and cold. Like, he really has. 8 of 24 is good, though. 11 minutes and 41 seconds of control time. And the last thing I have before I hand it off to you, Matt, about Jacob Malkoun, I find this funny, and hopefully somebody else does. He was listed as 6'2" coming into the UFC. And then once he's in the UFC, he's 5'9".
The Draymond Green.
Who was the fluffer there?
I couldn't imagine. Like, that, you just, you played yourself, Jacob Malkoun.
Tell me, Rod Stewart.
I think AJ Dobson has a great chance to win this fight because you sort of brought it up. I'll just sort of finish the point. Abdulrazak Alhassan needs kicks to really, really open up his whole striking game, whereas AJ Dobson can keep this fight in boxing range, and I do genuinely think that's almost going to help him defend the takedown attempts from Jacob Malkoun, because A, he's going to be close enough to where this fight's probably going to be him pressuring Malkoun, so he'll be the one to sort of force the takedown attempts out of Malkoun, and if they are just in open space in the middle of the cage, I do think Dobson's at least the more likely one to score points in the open space.
So it's definitely a good opportunity. Again, the odds for this one, Dobson open to minus 200 favorite. He's a minus 152 right now. For Jacob Malkoun, open to plus 170. He's a plus 125. So in the overall swing of things, Malkoun, one of the bigger movers and shakers on the card, about a 27% clip so far. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprise to us, they are to you. 743 total votes, 75% Dobson, 70% by knockout. For the 25% that I'm Malkoun, 74% by decision. I have AJ Dobson based on the striking. I don't think he's going to have as much success as Phil Haas does. If he does, that would surprise me. I'm eager to see how Dobson's cardio holds up because this is another thing that I have. The weight classes that AJ Dobson's fought at as a pro. 3 fights at 170, 1 at a catchweight at 175, 3 at 185. And if you look at him when he's on Dana White's Contender Series, I don't know if he's really a middleweight. I really don't when I look at him. So I'll be eager to see him in the cage against Malkoun, who's another one of those guys that, like, he's kind of got a Kelvin Gastelum. Like, Malkoun's one of those guys that's not very tall in this division. He's a little bit bigger. He's not chiseled out of stone. So I'm eager to see how Dobson makes out in this fight. But I do think if he's not able to get it really popping in the first round, Malkoun can definitely come back. We've seen him do that in the past. We've seen him do that on the regional scene too.
100%. I do like AJ Dobson, though, mainly for his striking.
Matt, both of us going with strong style / immortal martial arts own AJ Dobson to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight and the rest of them, because we got some big time bangers. Lewis Tuivasa in the co-main event, and in the main event, Whittaker Adesanya #2. You're not going to want to miss. Let's keep it locked in with Fight Name Picks. We always say, let's get into it.